we're live on YouTube. Oh, Miller? Miller, are you there?
Yep, I was watching the video.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna throw to you in the intro, and I'm gonna be like, "This is Kristen in production," and then Miller, how's it going? And then you can say hi, and then just like we'll do like a little, like couple-minute intro on like the science that you do and your background, and then we'll go into the developmental biology stuff.
Sure.
All right, sweet. We'll begin this. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I welcome to Catalyst, the science news live chat show from Science Prime. Science Prime is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping science literacy by making science more approachable and debunking disinformation about science online. We are so happy to have you. Thanks for tuning in. I just want to say thank you so much for all the outpouring of support that we've had since um, uh, our first episode, and I just really appreciate it. If you want to get involved with helping with the graphics or anything like that, we would really use a logo and that kind of thing. Um, get in contact with me. We have a Discord, Reddit, all that kind of stuff. So uh, thank you so much. I really, really, really appreciate all the support. If you like the show, please like it and subscribe because it really does help the YouTube algorithm to kind of push our show out there and get the message out. We have some really cool new additions to the show too. We have Kristen coming in on production. Welcome, Kristen. Can you say hi?
Hello, everyone.
Hi. All right, and also a very special guest this week. We have Miller. Miller, can you say hi?
What is going on, Greg?
All
Look
right.
at the new you got there.
Thanks, man. All right. Hey, well, Miller, can you just kind of like explain your science and your science background? What what was your research background in academia?
Yeah, man. Did my PhD at UCSD with Steve Mayfield. So I'm a molecular biologist by training. From there, I kind of went straight to starting my own company, Triton Algae Innovations, and I've been doing this job for the last 7.5, 8 years now. So really trying to translate kind of what we do in the academic world into real world products that can have an impact on everyday life.
Awesome. So what would be some of those products then?
Yeah, so one of the things that we really try to do at Triton is to take algae and ask very simple questions such as, can we make novel things? And so we really look at the biochemistry of a cell and ask, what tools that cell has to create new valuable potential bioproducts. Or we just simply ask, could different types of algae that we worked with be new types of food? So at Triton, we focus primarily on creating these new foods, kind of what we call future foods,
Interesting.
in various ways.
Awesome. But does that algae have like special properties in it, or is it just more efficient to grow that food?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. And so, what I tell people all the time is, we kind of lump algae into one kind of big word.
Yeah.
Be the same as me lumping, marijuana in with spinach. They're plants that serve different purposes.
Yeah.
And algae world, it's kind of the same thing, right? You've got different algae that can serve different purposes. You've got ones that could be more efficient at making food. You've got ones that can make, in our case, for example, unique kind of meat-like compounds that you can use for, things like the Impossible Burger.
Cool.
Yeah.
Really cool. Well, thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah, man, super excited and looking forward to your podcast you're taking off.
all right, yeah, man. Here we go. All right, so on to the so in under the microscope this week, we are going to be looking at um, developmental biology. I think that this is such an interesting field that is taking off right now. 2018, we had a really cool, actually Science Mag named it the breakthrough of the year because it just has gotten to this point where I think our imaging capabilities, the ability to make mutations with fluorescent markers, meaning that we actually have fluorescent proteins that could be bound to proteins and follow that throughout the cell. And then also, specifically for developmental biology, kind of like seeing how that organism grows up for the first time. So, do you have any thoughts about that, Miller, before we watch the video?
Yeah, man. I mean, if you think about kind of some of the breakthroughs that we've had, Dr. Chen, who's the guy who developed the GFP protein.
Mm-hmm. UCSD.
What's that?
That UCSD, right? You got the Nobel?
Yeah, UCSD. He passed away recently. But, just a simple breakthrough where you can, like you said, follow things around the cell and just really visualize what is happening. And, before that, we were only able to kind of just imagine, and then to see things happen really change the way we view cells and how they function and the things that they can do. And so I think this paper that you speak of is just another example of the use of that technology.
Yeah, because like in the last, I mean, what, 10, 15 years, we've had high throughput sequencing abilities kind of being developed too. So I think it's kind of like a merger of two worlds, right? Where you have things like FISH, fluorescence in situ hybridization, where you're actually able to see specific genetic DNA combinations like be highlighted inside of the cell, like whether or not that actually has that sequence within its cell. And then you have kind of coming out of the church lab too, using CRISPR on top of that to target specific DNA sequences within the cell, and then do real-time sequencing within the cell. I mean, that's just crazy to me.
Yeah, man, it's kind of really fun to see, all these technologies that we talk about, and they're developed in basic academic labs, which sometimes people don't understand. The reason why we as a country spend so much more money on research and development than other countries is because these basic discoveries just lead to things that actually have a drastic impact on our everyday life. And I think sequencing is just another example of that. You see a company like Illumina who got 18 small business grants when they first started their company, and without that, they wouldn't be the company that they kind of are today. That is just changing the way that we think about science and disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no way that, I mean, think of all the grants and applications that Doudna was writing for all those years talking about antibacterial resistance. It's like, oh no, this is important. This is important. No way that she's thinking, one day that she's going to make this genome editing tool. But I think it's a great example of, research versus engineering, right? Where research can kind of like help with that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's watch this video.
How do many kinds of cells arise from a single cell during development? Single-cell sequencing technologies and new computational tools are providing the most detailed picture yet of this process. In several types of studies, embryos of different stages were separated into individual cells, and the cells are sequestered away in droplets of oil. What kind of cell am I looking at here? To find out, the researchers sequenced each cell's messenger RNA, which reflects active genes. Each cell type has a profile, a set of active genes that define its identity as a muscle cell or a type of brain cell. How do I track a cell through time? In one line of experiments, researchers analyzed some 92,000 zebrafish cells and gathered data from 7 different embryo stages. To help tie the cells to a time point, they added genetic barcode DNA to the cytoplasm of some of the single-cell embryos. These are many tiny pieces of unique DNA that will be incorporated over time into the genomes of daughter cells. By the end of the experiment, the combinations of barcodes reveal how the cells are related. Thus, they could trace each zebrafish cell's fate through time to see how a single cell gave rise to a variety of specialized cells.
Oh, wow, that's incredible. That was so cool.
That was crazy.
You really see it go like in real time there. I mean, just all those embryos of the zebrafish at one time, you can just see them all develop like that. That's just, and then sort too at the same time, knowing what's happening inside that. Each of those cells. I mean, that's just incredible. And it's at the population level, right? It's not just at the organism level. We're like just a collection of single cells, if you think about it. And you can really like see what's happening inside each of one of those cells as it develops. I mean, it's just so cool.
Yeah, man. What's crazy is, I think a lot of people sometimes ask, well, why are we studying this zebrafish here? And just the thought that, developmental biology and the things that we can learn to, can hopefully lead to one day, our ability to use stem cells to grow an organ, for example.
Yeah.
To really save someone's life. And just watching this kind of just is amazing to see kind of real time.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Such as heart, nerves, and skin. What can this tell us? This approach is already.
So we have a question here in chat. Frank Fields, that turns into a zebra? And
Zebrafish. Yeah, it's a
yes,
zebrafish. It's a small,
zebrafish.
small little fish that's uh, yeah, you can actually buy them at pet stores. They're like everywhere. What's crazy is that I was actually at PetSmart, and they actually have like I forget what they're called. I think it's like Day Glow or something they call it. There's actually a patented name. They actually they genetically modify it.
Dayglow?
Yeah, they put in these they put in these markers to actually make them glow over time, and you can actually they glow. The fish literally glow, and you have like UV lights that you can put in the aquarium tanks, and you can
Wow.
actually see them grow, glow different colors. Pretty cool.
Is that safe for the fish to have dayglow inside of them?
Well, it's just a fluorescent protein, right? So it's not
Okay.
like the
Yeah.
actual is day glow something else. I don't know if that maybe that's
Yeah.
it's just a fluorescent protein. So theoretically, it's not going to be able to compete as well against in the wild versus a zebrafish that didn't have to make that protein, right? That's like
Yeah.
expending resources, but it should be fine. Yeah.
Perfect. And then I
Developmental
think we'll go ahead and field Joe Ostran's question, where do babies come from, on a later podcast.
biologists have thought that once the
Yeah.
cell starts down a path
We'll
to
get to that.
become, say,
We'll
Yeah.
fill you in,
muscle
but there's been a
cell,
lot
that
of
it would
good
not
books out there
stretch.
on that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the next one.
Yeah.
Researchers observed
Crazy
some
story.
zebrafish
I
cells.
came home to a random stork walking across my yard.
Uh-oh. Did you get a baby?
My neighbors did.
different
Oh, perfect.
Congrats to those neighbors.
Yeah.
types, as indicated by the change in what genes were active, after they should have been well committed to a certain fate. In frogs, gene activity showed that even when an embryo looks like an undifferentiated blob, cells are already starting down the paths to their
Wow.
eventual identities. With these tools, researchers can also see how development differs from one animal to the next, or even learn a recipe for coaxing different cell types from stem cells.
Wow, that's so cool. So the reason why I bring this up, and unfortunately we have 5 minutes left in our Zoom meeting. I did not set up the. My school does not subscribe to Zoom Prime, apparently. The cool thing that I wanted to talk about this was that basically labs are trying to grow brain cells through cell culture to see the impacts of COVID-19 on their brains.
Wow.
So it's kind of
It
like
seems like there'd be other implications for that too.
yeah, exactly. So that's kind of one of the problems that they're talking about here is like, can these cells become conscious, and what's the kind of ethical implication there too? So yeah, I think it's really interesting. Where is that? I can't find that article. Let's see.
I mean, I think that's a very interesting question. Where does consciousness kind of begin, and is just one type of brain cell sufficient to do it, or do you need this, the whole nervous system that kind of gives those brain cells the experiences of the world?
Yeah, here we go.
Really say that.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I think like as humans, we intuitively kind of put ourselves at the top of a pyramid of consciousness, but over how many centuries now of research has that been wrong? I mean, after every step we've defined this line, and we have been wrong at every single stage. I think that and I have, like, whatever the question is, though, whatever the answer to that question is, whether these brain cells are conscious, I still think that there's some validity to studying COVID-19 in brain cells, because I mean, primate research is banned, right? So and I mean, rat brains is kind of tentative at best. So I really think that brain cells in cell culture would probably be the best way to do it.
Wow, that's interesting.
And yes, and if you're not aware, there's been several studies now that have had shown long-term neurological issues with COVID-19. COVID-19 obviously being the disease caused by SARS-CoV-2, and the long-term neurodegenerative disease that comes with it. And I mean, we had like a lot of anecdotal evidence about like people being foggy and feeling like they have dementia for months.
Yeah.
It's really pervasive right now.
And
Yeah.
we don't know if that's going to be lifelong or what, or a temporary condition.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's kind of an interesting thought because, the blood-brain barrier is really built to keep things like a virus out. So you'd almost
Mm.
have to believe that the virus has some way of disrupting that blood-brain barrier to gain access to the brain.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Are there angiotensin receptors there? Isn't that what they need?
What are those? What are angio?
Well, I'm asking the scientist here.
I don't know.
I am your non-science voice.
You're talking about the COVID-19 receptor that's
Yes.
targeting
Yeah.
lung
Oh,
development, for
oh,
example.
okay. ACE2.
Yeah,
Yes. The ACE2
Gotcha.
receptors. They bind to those receptors.
yeah.
So maybe
They're
that's how
definitely
they're crossing.
those receptors are definitely on brain cells, and so there's a reason why you would study it there. But I guess then it begs the question. I don't know about the blood-brain barrier and anyone finding that receptor on the blood-brain barrier.
Right.
Um, might be some random inflammation that's being caused, which is kind of interesting too. We've been talking to a couple groups even in our world um, about develop some therapies, and one of the things that they were talking to us about was, aside from just the respiratory issues, just a lot of the organ failures that you see in people that have COVID-19, and so
Hmm.
there's just so much more about the inflammatory side of this disease that's still a little unknown.
Right. Right.
Interesting. Well, I think we're gonna try to get a premium Zoom link set up real quick, but for right now, um, while we do that, um, all right. Well, that's good. Yeah. All right. Well, that happened. um, all right. Well, I mean, I think developmental biology in general is just going to be such an interesting field. We're learning so much more at the organism level. I think that's the biggest thing, is that we're finding now about things that are happening, across the entire organism, and it's not just cell by cell, micro by micro, which is kind of a field or a way that we used to look at things through microbes, right? That microbes were one of the reasons why such a powerful tool, because you could see so much what was going on. It wasn't just a single cell, a single organism that you're looking at. You're looking at millions of cells. So it was kind of like a black box, kind of like what's going on with these huge organisms that are a collection of cells, for example, the human body. And developmental biology with imaging techniques, and imaging is only getting better, right? I mean, the different types of imaging, the different um, wavelengths that we can see, we're only going to be able to see more, sequencing in real time. And because if you think about it, in order to sequence an organism, we've had to pull the DNA out. We had to pull the DNA out of the organism in order to actually look at the DNA sequence, but not anymore. We can actually sequence the whole thing at the same time and look at things. So, one second, sorry. So it's so cool. I think it really is a very, very cool time for science.
You might have to activate his ability to share screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna make him the host.
Sorry, technical difficulties. Thanks, everyone.
Am I still mic?
Here we go. One second. Do 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 do. Technology is making our lives better, everyone. It's definitely, for sure. Oh man. Okay. One sec.
Am I still mic?
All right. little technical difficulties, but nothing that we haven't overcome before. Here we go. Really want to make sure everyone is getting going, able to see everything. Okay. What's it? Could we get the Kristen to let into the front of the waiting room?
She has not asked to join yet.
Oh, there we go. Okay, you're in. You're joining.
You're host, Greg. You're also the host.
Okay.
So.
All right. Cool. Thanks, dude. Appreciate it. You should be in. Coming in.
All right.
All right. We are back.
All right.
We're back.
Right. Perfect.
Here we go.
Here we
Sponsored
go.
by, Springfield's production.
There you go. Feedback loop. Yeah. All right. So that was our deep dive into developmental biology. I think that there's some really cool things that are going on, and it's a really interesting field with new research horizons that of especially with genetics and high throughput sequencing, like we were talking about before, and all the imaging that's capable. I mean, it's really interesting. It's a lot. Microscopy is a lot different than what you might remember it in high school or your micro 101 class. I mean, you're talking about huge confocal microscopes that have double monitors, and you're looking at things that are just way out of the scope of anything that you thought that you were looking at before, and you're not getting headaches. You're not. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, man. I mean, some of that work is pretty intense. I mean, I'm just witnessing some of the grad students go through that, and just the kind of things that they witness on a scale that really you're kind of the first person to see some of this stuff happen is pretty amazing.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So for our next section, we got some like shorter, lighter videos on just general biology stuff. So, whoops, back here. So this primate is on the brink of extinction. Rope bridges could save it. I think this really highlights a big problem that we have in general. Just a video of this monkey looking. Oh, it looks so cool. I would love to see that in my neighborhood. I think that would be really cool. I think that's a given.
They could play with our donkeys.
Yeah. I mean, a big part of saving biodiversity, and by biodiversity we mean the number of species that live in a community, and that's the number one indicator of environmental health for biomes, is how many species are actually living there. And one of the biggest problems is humans basically cutting off a lot of these organisms so that they could only inhabit a smaller and smaller part of that larger biome, and then getting cut off, and then you have these problems with emigration, which is leaving that place and breeding with other organisms or of the same species, and then immigration, obviously new genetic diversity coming into the population. So you seclude them, you give them a genetic bottleneck event where a lot of them die, and there's not that many genomes in there. You lack the diversity, and then on top of that, they can't go and they can't thrive by looking for new food, looking for new mates. It's a recipe for absolute disaster and environmental collapse.
Yeah, I mean, it's in addition to that, if you think about even just something that's probably more relevant to all of us, which is COVID, and you think about us even factory farming, cutting down these forests, and our animals are getting closer and closer to wildlife, and then you get cross-contamination of viruses that can infect some of these animals. And when you infect some of these animals, they come out as viruses that can then potentially infect us. And so you see that, whether that be with COVID-19, and if you believe it's bats or pangolins, but it's not going to be the last time that we see this, right? I think there's a very much so intense worry about the next kind of big flu, because you've got a virus that can infect birds, that can infect pigs, that can infect humans. And, when all these vectors kind of mix into say in one case, a pig, and then recombine into a more virulent virus that can infect all of us, that's the kind of thing that kind of, keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds terrifying. That would keep me up too.
Yeah. Which is why, like Greg said, the more we go and invade these areas and we limit the biodiversity that's out there, they become concentrated in certain areas. And, then we are basically setting ourselves up for not just this pandemic, but many more in the future. And I think I would compare it to, Category 5 hurricanes, which used to be, very rare, to now happening every few years. And so,
oh my God, I can't imagine.
What I worry about with pandemics is, we used to think, a serious flu happens once every 100 years. And now I think that we're going to have to rethink that because of how our invasiveness into these areas that are kind of sensitive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'd heard that there was some like genetic trait that you could actually sequence back to the bubonic plague. Like you could see like the ancestors, whether or not they survived well, like before, and how they're doing now. I'm just recalling that. I don't remember the study.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty serious thing. I mean, I think, whether or not we like live to see a pandemic, in my opinion, like having a world that an environment that we can live in is so important too, right? That's where we get our food and everything like that. And with, an environmental collapse, it's the ability to get food. It's the ability to live, to like be outside, even the caustic weather, preventing so many things that we take for granted. And it's really, really important for us to conserve the amount of species that we do have, and keep that biodiversity. Because I've seen this in a couple different areas, right, where you see these this type of rope bridge for the monkeys, but then you also see kind of like bridges, like overpasses that are grassed and stuff, so that animals can go back and forth.
Yeah. So. It's kind of crazy. Like we think that this is just a problem in, say, a rainforest, but we see it in local developments, man. Even here in San Diego, where they think about, putting up a freeway, and now you're cutting off a traditional kind of migration path for these animals, and these are pretty serious things that maybe aren't taken into consideration with the type of scrutiny that they should be taken.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with things like trophic cascades that we were talking about last week, where you take out one thing in the environment and another organism that you wouldn't think had been like connected to that one is taken out now, and now we can't rebuild it. That's the thing. I think a lot of people are relying on scientists' ability to rebuild these animal populations, when in reality, what we're seeing is a lot of like the vertebrates, right? The large animals with backbones is what we care about as humans largely, when we're actually killing off like 70% of the salamanders in the world are critically endangered. All of wetlands, like the wetlands habitat has been completely decimated. The mangrove forests have completely decimated. And we don't even know what's in those populations. That's the crazy part. We don't even know the sequences of the organisms in those populations. So how could we bring them back if we don't even know what they are?
Yeah. Well, that's the kind of unfortunate thing, right? The nice thing with biodiversity is you don't know you need it until you need it, right? There's going to come a time where there is some selective pressure on our planet. And, like any just even lab experiment we run, when there is more biodiversity, you have a stronger likelihood of surviving whatever selective pressure that you're applying to the culture. In this case, is our planet. And so, we are continually limiting our ability as a planet to, survive some of these catastrophic events that are probably on the horizon that we don't even know are on the horizon.
Exactly, like viruses and like things like you were talking about too. It all feeds in together. All right. So next up for the quick chat, we have why bird brains are more brilliant than anyone suspected.
All right, bird
Although
brains.
bird brains are tiny, they're packed with neurons, especially in areas responsible for higher level thinking. Two studies published last month in Science explore the structure and function of avian brains, revealing that they are organized similar to mammals and are capable of conscious thought. There you go. We were talking about conscious thought, and people. There you go. I, I mean, birds. I mean, especially with their mating ability, like where it's so the mating dance, the courtship dances. I think what is it? Ravens or crows have been shown that they can use tools. I mean, there's a lot going on there that I think we've taken for granted for a really long time.
Yeah.
All right, let's watch this video.
Bird brains are tiny. The common pigeon's is about the size of a peanut. But having smaller noggins doesn't mean birds are unintelligent. One way scientists estimate brain power is through the number of neurons present. Some birds have upwards of 1 to 2 billion, similar to monkeys. The intelligence of birds, from New Zealand
That's right. It's not
parrots
the
that
size of the brain
understand
that matters.
probability
It's how many neurons.
to ravens that can plan for the future.
Yeah, I just want to it reminded me like the cool things that can happen. I mean, the way that pigeons can, they actually still to this day have pigeon racing, that where you basically train them to go back to a spot.
Yeah.
And then you fly them like 50, 100 miles away, and then you release them all together, and then the first pigeon that like comes back to the spot that it's supposed to like wins. And it's like it's still unknown to science like how they're able to do that. We think that they're like looking at magnetic waves and that kind of thing. Like we really still have no idea. I mean, even for how small their brains are, they're still capable of insanely complicated things that we have no idea about.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, man. Even when you look at a bird, like thinking about how a bird flies and how we can't even mimic that with planes yet, it's quite amazing.
Exactly.
The engineering that nature has done.
Exactly.
Isn't a surprise to researchers who have long seen their capabilities. Early models proposed that only a small region of bird brains was responsible for complex behaviors, but this has been revised in recent
Whoops,
years.
got that one wrong.
Still, the detailed internal organization of bird brains hadn't been explored until now. Two new studies in Science dig into their structure and function, revealing even greater similarities to mammalian brains. Researchers shine different angles of light into extremely thin slices of the pallium, the area of the bird brain with a similar function to the neocortex of mammals. This allowed them to see a 3D view of the fibers that connect neurons. The fibers of owls and pigeons were organized much like those of mammals. Parallel fibers along the pallium were crosscut by perpendicular fibers between layers, forming columns of connection. These microcircuits could explain how birds are capable of complex behaviors, like newly discovered conscious experiences. Researchers tested whether crows are aware of what they see and do. First, they trained 2 crows to indicate whether they saw a faint light, a dark gray dot on a black background. After they flashed the dot and showed the rule for that round, which varied to prevent the birds from preparing their responses, they asked the crows to report what they saw. Because the dot was hard to make out from the background, the crows sometimes failed to report accurately. Instead, they had to decide whether they perceived a dot or not. Researchers inserted electrodes into the crows' brains to monitor how hundreds of neurons responded during this exercise. When the crows indicated that they saw a stimulus, hundreds of neurons fired before they made their selection. Those same neurons were silent when the birds demonstrated that they didn't see the faint dot. This response shows that the activity of birds represents more than what they see, adding them to the animals capable of conscious thought. Although the most recent common
I
ancestor...
didn't know that was like the dividing line on consciousness, whether or not the things that you see. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
of birds and mammals was alive about 320 million years ago. Both these
Very
studies
cool.
show striking
I would love to see how they actually train those birds to give them the response.
I know, right? That's so insane.
Kind of intense.
The red and the blue. I got a question from chat. Do you have any thoughts about the energy efficiency of the brain? basically talking about that brains might only use 20% of their total energy when your body is at rest. I mean, that's tough to say. I'm not a neurologist. Hard to say. I think
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that the whole thing, like only use like 10 to 20% of our brains, is kind of like an old trope that isn't really real anymore.
Yeah.
That we kind of like are using all of our brains, but like all the neurons aren't like all technically firing at the same time, kind of thing.
Right.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah, but the brains definitely are a pretty giant energy sink. I mean, there takes a lot of glucose to keep that thing running.
right. And I mean, all the neurons and everything. Or isn't it like we have more neurons in our brains than stars in the galaxy or something like that? Crazy.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Isn't that insane? It's like
Yeah.
what? Um,
Yeah, that's amazing.
it doesn't. I mean, it really goes in. I think this paper and this idea is like it's not surprising to me that birds have this higher level of thought, especially when you think of something called referential communication. And
Mhm.
referential communication is the ability to have a basically like a dance or a gesture that actually symbolizes something that you're referring to, right? So this,
Mhm.
and for example, one of the best taught examples of this is the wiggle dance with bees, where they're going to go out, they're going to find the flower, and then they're going to come back to the nest, and then they basically wiggle in the direction of the nectar source, and how far back and left and right they like wiggle, and then how far they wiggle is indicative of exactly where that flower is. So if
Yeah.
bees are capable of referential communication, you know,
Right.
I mean that's right.
Pretty cool.
So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. You know, one of the things that I really hope we see in our lifetime, man, is that we actually develop a kind of neural, electrical interface where, we can have a computer kind of decipher what it is that, different brains are thinking and feeling and
mhm.
experiencing. That would be just truly fantastic.
Yeah, I mean the neural link, right? That's what I mean. I think
Yeah.
that's the idea to try to. That'd be so cool. Because you
Because at
could.
the end of the day, the signals that our brain is experiencing are, in essence, electrical signals
Mm-hmm.
uh, when you think about them. So I'm sure there's a lot of complex programming in our biological systems, but um, I, I would love to have that before we die.
I mean, that's the. I mean, all we are and all our personality is basically a series of neurotransmitter ratios in our brain, right? That's the. What's his name? The futurist, like Krasowski? I forget what his name is. It's the singularity hypothesis. As soon as humans are able to discover that, how we can replicate the neurotransmitter ratios in our brain, we can actually replicate that. And once you can replicate that in a computer, then we could live forever. So that's what the singularity is. Basically, you're trying to live until your brain can be uploaded into the computer, and then your personality, exactly who you are right now, could just be uh, going forever within inside of a
I
computer.
saw a Black Mirror episode about that. It was pretty creepy.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
you know what's crazy about that thought is like, we experience the world and for example, we feel good, when we experience something, or someone who like, does some drug that feels a rush of whatever it is, right? Like, can you mimic that for a computer to have some type of positive reinforcement? We could even delve deep into that whole like AI world here where, can you get a computer to feel good about certain responses? This just kind of trippy to think that, man. Like, just imagine being in your Tesla, and if your Tesla drives good, you can give it a treat,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can make it feel good, you can make it feel bad too. So there's all kinds of like ethical stuff.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that kind of gets into the whole thing with like robots and how are you like the ethical idea of, um, I mean, consciousness with robots, right? I mean, what are we?
Hmm.
And I mean, if that's what we're gonna be looking at and the moral questions that we're thinking about there, I mean, how we're just gonna look like absolute savages that we aren't taking better care of like the mammal species, the ones that like just what is it, 200 miles away, the dolphin species that's going extinct right now in the um, Baja Sea because they're being overfished. It's like
Mm.
they're just something with a V. I forget what they're called. Um, it's just an interesting idea. I do worry. I do worry that like we as humans like might get too wrapped up in this idea of AI and like this that's it. We don't need the Earth anymore, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because like right now we've already see ourselves as outside of nature. I think we are like kind of like on top of it as opposed to living with it. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have in the pollution that we have with the economic crisis that we're causing. The because I mean, how many people know about the mass extinction that's going on right now, led by humans?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the crazy thought too when you think about AI and like how you can give it directives. And, we as humans kind of, interestingly enough, know what we need to do, but then we impulsively don't do it. Um, so you almost ask yourself, what is it that, humankind or really any species, what are we programmed to actually do? And it almost feels sometimes like our core directive is to repopulate, or not repopulate, but to regenerate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, you really ask, when you program an AI at that point, this becomes a much deeper conversation at some point, but when you program an AI, what is its core directive that you will ultimately give it to do? Will it be save the planet? In which case,
Mm-hmm.
probably have to go Thanos on us and slaughter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. I mean,
because we're the ones that are killing it.
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, that's kind of like the interesting hypothesis that Dawkins postulated too, the selfish gene theory, that
Yeah.
the genes within an organism are pushing that organism to evolve over time, get breed with more diverse organisms to increase mutations and all that kind of stuff. It's like the genes are the ones that are the actual driving factor. So once we
Yeah.
kind of like give that over to, I wonder what the I was just looking at this, the evolutionary substrate. I was thinking about this and looking at this, the singularity Wikipedia, where you have abiogenesis, DNA, RNA. DNA, I guess, would be that selfish gene theory, right? And then now it's the cells, human evolution into our brains. And then now with silicon semiconducting and the internet, we have a digital kind of evolutionary substrate, and then a biodigital fusion, which is that singularity that I was talking about before.
Yeah.
So,
It's just crazy to think how primitive when you think about humans and the planet, right?
mm-hmm.
And you and I grow, cultures of whatever micro in a flask or in a fermenter. You kind of witness the kind of lag, log phase growth and stationary phase, and
Mm-hmm.
you look at the human population, and it just mimics that almost exactly. To
Mm-hmm.
last culture that's going to run out of nutrients, and then
Yeah.
bad things happen.
Yeah,
So
that's a great point. I mean, we're not outside of our nature. I mean, I think, social Darwinism and stuff like that is kind of overblown. I think one of the biggest things about humans is that we're, hopefully able to rise above that, right? Where we can rise above our environments and we can think outside of nutrient needs and like try to plan out scenarios. But I think that the problem is that with the environment collapsing around us, we only have fewer and fewer resources now to, and we're kind of pushing ourselves in a harder and harder position to recover from, to just make decisions from. Uh, yeah, so it is really scary, I think, to think about. Really cool. All right. So next, we got bird brains. Next up, we got even a car can't kill this beetle. Here's
oh
why.
man, I'm not gonna lie. I think your insect segments are my favorite.
Oh, cool, man. I love. I was it was one um, insect ecology class that really like changed my view on insects, and because I was an evolution major, and I through the first time kind of saw these insects as, I mean, they're like the conquerors of the first animals, really. They're before plants, going out there, conquering land, and it's just so cool. I just think that they are the true warriors of the to the land. Oh, before we go off, can we got a question from chat? Can AI ever be considered living? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I guess it's.
Can it reproduce?
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's whoever defines what living is, and so.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, as a biologist, I'm a little. I'd have to think about this because, in my opinion, viruses are alive, which is not the consensus among the biological field. But
Right, because
so,
it can't reproduce, right? Isn't that like the thing?
oh my God, don't start. But there's a lot of parasitoids that can't like reproduce without their host organism. So if that's your criteria, then you're gonna have to throw out a lot of insects too.
Interesting. Okay.
So we could have a whole episode on this. I'm telling you, we should have a debate on this. I'm not joking. It'd be really cool. Um,
That's an interesting way to look at it.
so, okay, wow. In additional experiments, the Rivera and colleagues found the beetle's toughness and strength arise because the two halves of its outer wing cover are connected like joined jigsaw pieces. The bulbous shape of the interlocking lobes and the right number of them, about 5, optimize these properties, Rivera and colleagues report in Nature. In addition, the supports between the wing cover and the body are structured as to protect vital organs. Whoa.
it's kind of cool. Like this, there's this whole field of like biomimicry.
Mm-hmm.
This is why it's so, sad for us to think that we're losing species that we've never really
Exactly.
where nature has created such cool ways to engineer things that we as humans will steal to create better and far superior machines to what we've been able to create just on our own.
Absolutely. Right here, we are looking at the next generation of bioplastics. This is what your car might be made of in the future instead of metal. Because this stuff
Oh,
is stronger.
fascinating.
This stuff is stronger and it's more bioavailable. It can actually degrade. It can, instead of plastics, what if we use something that was made out of, the shells of this thing? I mean, it's completely possible that's where a lot of this is going. There's a lot of structural engineers that do a lot of research into chitin shells, into diatoms and that kind of structure. So I mean, one question I had, Miller, was what are bioplastics and algae looking like? Could we use plants to create these plastics?
Yeah, I mean, basically, at the end of the day, you just need a plant oil, and then you can turn that into a plastic. And so, in the algae world, you got companies like Algenesis who are, working and creating flip-flops that are, biodegradable. What's cool about, bioplastics is because they're slightly different in structure than a typical plastic made from a petroleum product. They'll actually degrade. So you don't get the issues that you have with those kind of traditional plastics that then accumulate in the oceans. And so I think that's the cool thing about what we do as scientists, is that you can create things that are useful, but then you can also, rethink how we did things in the past. I think that's the kind of problem as a society as a whole, though, is when you think about, we become comfortable with what we use, right? I can't tell you how many conversations I have had with even slightly liberal leaning people who are plastic, right? But they can't seem to wrap their heads around a new way to do something that would be, better for the environment. And so definitely getting people to experience this new world of science, I think, might help them to be more comfortable with those things.
Yeah, because I mean, the biggest thing with petroleum-based plastics is that they don't actually biodegrade, right? What happens is they just break down into smaller and smaller nanoparticles that then invade fish, and that's why every single fish now has some type of plastic in the mussels, and then we eat those mussels, and we're eating the plastic.
That's correct. Yeah, you see that not just fish, but a lot of crustaceans in the ocean. So shrimp, that's a major problem too.
So it's I mean, and pound for pound, these things are insane. I actually saw one of the coolest ones was spider silk with nanotubes, carbon nanotubes, which is a type of nanoparticle, which is just like to try to bolster it, which I thought was really cool. Here we go. Here's this thing getting run over. Look at this. Boom. Short and sweet. Look at that.
Oh my gosh.
Boom. Look at that. It was right there.
He's fine.
Love that video. It reminds me of like 2005 YouTube, where it's just like, short and to the sweet, right to the point.
Yeah.
Like, boom.
Yeah.
Boom.
I kind of wish they would have put him on just the asphalt, though.
I know, he's in a little pile of dirt. It kind of cushioned his impact.
I don't know. He's right on the top there. I don't. Or it is.
Diabolical Iron.
No, he's got to earn it, man. I don't give him that.
It's not good enough. I don't know.
Right there, man.
That's incredible. Yeah, I do agree. I think that.
I was promised one thing. I was, sold a bill of goods.
Yeah, it's just interesting that, especially diatoms. I mean, if you haven't seen a diatom up close, you are missing out. I mean,
Yeah, those silica shells that they have, man, they're
yes.
cool.
I mean, there is an entire world of microbiology that exists that we don't even see with our eyes. I mean, you're so limited by the wavelengths that our eyes can see, and it's because they're big enough to like see citrus fruits. They're not big enough to see microbes on the on the ground. So it's like, we really miss out beyond the 400 to 700 nanometers that we normally see. And so these intricate structures, people are looking at, trying to see kind of like the strengths and what can we do and what can we kind of use and what we can make things out of to make things even stronger than concrete, stronger than steel.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of interesting, man, in the microbial world, even in the food space that I'm in. You think about how many things are actually designated as food in various countries. It's not that many. It's a handful of things. And so, when you think about even eating animals, at the end of the day, animals are bioreactors that are converting some other thing that they ate that ultimately created energy from sunlight. And you've got these multiple conversions from a microbe, a photosynthetic microbe, all the way to an animal that we then eat. All this lost efficiency. And so, for a lot of us in the microbial world, we're trying to create microbes because you eliminate these multiple steps of inefficiency and energy loss basically from an organism that just did photosynthesis. And so definitely a lot of things out there that make a lot of interesting, not just bioproducts, but, food that Joe Schmo can go hopefully one day down into the grocery store and buy.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have photosynthesis, right? The energy and going from the sun into the primary producer, which is the making that molecule out of that photosynthetic energy, and then from that grass, then you have the herbivore that's eating that grass, and that herbivore's muscles are so dislike the plants that they're eating. It's like, I think if they get like 10% energy conversion or something, it's insanely low.
Yeah, one cow is like, for every 1 kilo that a cow eats, every 10 kilos a cow eats, it makes 1 kilo of actual body weight.
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then when you go from herbivores to carnivores, you'd think that it'd be better, and it kind of is because you have meat to meat, but then you have like all of the energy expenditure to get there. You have all that like mastication and biting it down, and there's a lot of energy that's expended in that, and that's why the carnivore is like so rarely that's why they so rarely go out and hunt, which is why, going back to what we were talking about before, it's so important that they actually can hunt and go on these large, meandering things, these meandering hunts. So it's, wow, microbiology is such a cool subject.
I can tell you like it, Greg.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Man's got a passion.
All right. Well, all right, Miller, do you have anything else you want to go over, man? You want to talk about anything else?
Man, I think that what's exciting about, tomorrow, and not just tomorrow, but our future is that, science and I think engineering are just two fields where there's not enough people to fill the jobs that are available.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that, a podcast like yours will inspire more people to come to this interesting field not just as academic scientists, but in industry. And I think that we're going to be able to do great things once we get the brightest minds working in our fields.
Definitely, definitely. I think that there's so much left to discover, and one of the biggest fallacies out there is like, we're doing pretty good. What's there left to discover?
Yeah.
I can't. Think about that. Think about that 100 years ago, when someone was like, "Wow, the airplane, we're done, we're
Gotta
done."
be done now.
Yeah. What else? What else? We did it. We did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you think about some of the breakthroughs. Is in the 70s and 80s, we made microbes make insulin, which changed how many people survived from diabetes, and then and now we have people who can do CRISPR-Cas9 to help hemophiliacs, and so
Yeah.
Yeah.
so many cool things happening.
Yeah, I mean, bringing it back, CRISPR. How did we miss CRISPR for so long? That's what blows my mind. How pervasive it was, and it is currently in so many microbes. And here we are, just finding out about it now. And even, oh my gosh, don't even start about the world of microbiology. And then basically the whole field is founded on like 24, maybe 100 organisms. I mean, it's very, very rare to have something that you can actually grow in the lab, you can culture, you can actually do experiments on, that you can actually inject DNA and actually make mutations in. I mean, 99% of microbes out there we haven't grown in the lab, we haven't sequenced, or that we can't genetically modify. So I mean, and that's a whole world of biomolecules. It's a whole world of new ways that proteins could be made, new ways that they could be expressed, regulatory patterns, all that kind of stuff, and it's all just out there, and it's out there right now.
Yeah, and that's you think about CRISPR, even, man. Just think about the concept of CRISPR. It's that a bacteria basically has an immune system.
Exactly.
Not something that I think a lot of people don't understand, that how we were able to as a society, discover a bacteria's immune system, and now take that technology and revolutionize kind of the healthcare industry. And we're just starting to see a trickling of some of the advances that are being made with that technology now.
Exactly. And how long that's been there. I mean, it's basically like a top 10 like hit list, right? Like what is it, like when you put up like a wanted list or something? It's like this. Yeah. If you see this DNA sequence, you better cut it. And it's remembering.
But I'll tell you what, yeah, we'll have to discuss that maybe another time, but just the ethical questions with CRISPR and the ability now to engineer embryos, basically, to create, in essence, whatever it is we want to make. And so there's a lot of just ethical issues that will have to be discussed at another time.
I'm really I'm excited that in science people are talking about it more. I mean, normally, like, for example, at a conference, you'd have like the ethics discussion be at the last panel of the last day, and nobody would go to it. But now they're trying to like weave in those ethics panels, throughout the day at these conferences, trying to gauge, more discussion on it. I mean, it's definitely.
I think that's the thing, though, is that when we didn't have the ability, we didn't need to discuss many ethical questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the whole Spider-Man adage, right? With more power comes more responsibility, and so
exactly.
Definitely needs to be something that's discussed further.
Yeah, I think. I mean, in general, though, I mean, at the same time, I think that it's one of those things where if we don't do it, someone else is going to, and what is the moral implications of them creating the precedent too? Because then we have to roll it back, and we have to go forward at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it's just it's almost like, when you think about it, creating the atom bomb.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You create it, so then your competing country or competing civilization feels the need to create it, and so where it stops, I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's in a weird way, like, for example, the stem cell ban by George W. Bush actually pushed people to look into researching new ways to artificially create that kind of host kind of thing. So I think with restrictions, there's still some type of research still going on no matter what happens. It's just what's the end product, and it's the ethical question of, if people are wondering, it's like, okay, so let's say you had a mutation where you had we're curing some type of disease, but then what happens to and it's let's say it's really good, right? Let's say it's 90% effective, which is incredibly good. What happens to those 10% of embryos that don't have those mutations now? What happens to that 1% of mutation of embryos that have a deleterious mutation where it's an off-site mutation and now it's even worse? Or what happens to that 1% now it's better? Now it has like some growth ability that we're thinking about. I mean, there's so many things to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it comes back to that what we were talking about a little bit at the beginning, which is at the end of the day, as a scientist, if I had to make my bet, I'd bet on the fact that diversity of genes ultimately is what we will need to survive what we just don't know we need yet. And so I really do think that, I worry about that whole engineering of the superhuman, but you're engineering it for today's world. But what about, 200 years from now world? And we can maybe even end on the whole, like, getting rid of, like you said, 10% of the population. That if you think about it, that's kind of the world we live in right now, where everyone's tired of COVID, and we're talking about letting basically 1 to 3% of the population die, which is kind of insane.
Yeah, man. I mean, it can't be. Yeah, I think that we are, to go for a full circle, we are still on the precipice of understanding that, and it's hard to know. I mean, the evolution is definitely going on, like you were saying, in the virus side. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Hey man, well, thanks for having me. Really,
yeah, thanks Miller. Appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, looking forward to your booming popularity. And
thanks, pal.
let me know if you ever need me back again.
Okay, sounds good. All right,
man.
All right, peace.
Bye, Miller. Thank you.
Bye, thank you. All right, everyone. And now, on to peer review. All right, so peer review is going to be our section on dismantling and talking about disinformation about science, conspiracy theories, and engaging with people that have different views than us. So, and this episode, I really wanted to talk about vaccines, because vaccines are something that you see talked about negatively on both sides of the political spectrum right now. You have a lot of anti-vaxxers that don't believe that vaccines are ever good. We have people that don't trust the government currently, so they're not going to take any vaccine that's from them. And I just wanted to kind of like go over that a little bit and talk about what this is, because vaccines are so good. Vaccines are, undoubtedly probably one of the best scientific breakthroughs that's ever happened. And it saves countless lives, millions of lives, and that's it. I mean, really, that should be the end of the show. There should be vaccines are made. All right, bye, everyone. How else could it be? But here we are, and that's what this show is about. Ultimately, we're about trying to engage with these ideas. And I think it's important to remember that vaccines are basically your own immune system responding to this. Yes, you get a vaccine, but it bolsters your immune system to do it. It makes your body capable of dealing with these viruses. It's not like an antibiotic where that molecule is going to be interfering with the bacteria and that antibiotic's going to be killing it. No, it's souping up, it's upgrading. You're getting the better model, the premium immune system. So please take your vaccine. So, and honestly, like in this show, I wanted to try to go over anti-vaxxer videos and things like that. But to be honest with you, I can't find them. I can't find them. They don't exist on YouTube right now because they just don't. They're removed, and for good reason, right? Because they should be. And but I wanted to try to actually bring on some. Okay. All right. So let's bring on a video here. One second, sorry. All right. Here we go. So.
This is another.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Sorry, getting this pulled up. Of course, 1 second. Sorry. Technical difficulties this week. Okay, 1 second, almost there. What is going on? Here we go. There. Sorry people, 1 second. Okay, you know what? These people shouldn't even get, they shouldn't get any time. I'm sick of giving these people, right, let's not give them any time. We can listen to it though. Here we go.
Level of crazy town. And then the
New York and on the
So it's a
New
radio show that they
in the
have.
world.
This is the Ebro addresses Carrie Hilson's 5G coronavirus conspiracy theory. So this is one of the funniest things to me. That the biggest I tried to look up conspiracy theories on COVID-19, and the #1 conspiracy theory on hits on YouTube and everything like that is actually that the coronavirus vaccine has a 5G chip inside that vaccine, and they're going to use that vaccine to track you. I mean, you can't make this up. How does that make any sense? And if they believe that, do they have a smartphone? Do they understand that this is actually what happens constantly with the smartphone? This is already happening. There is no conspiracy there. That's already happening. They're already being tracked. But the conspiracy though is that they're saying no more phones. I guess we're going straight to the vaccine, which is just blows my mind. But here we go.
Economy's falling apart.
This was back in March
Schools closed.
16.
Yo, the world is closed.
March 16, 2020.
Level of crazy town. And then to make matters worse, I don't know if you guys been paying attention to the 5G.
Oh, there it is.
Conspiracy.
Watch out.
There were people, pundits, the internet, before 5G was rolling out, saying that don't roll it out. Don't get 5G. Stop the government from 5G. It's going to have serious health complications on the world.
Really? I think Carrie Hilson's getting dragged on the internet right now for posting all this.
Yes, she did. Carrie, go off. Tell your truth, mama. There's nothing wrong with thinking about it. Whether it's factual or not, it should cross your mind. These microwaves and these signals in the air could have dangerous implications.
Ramifications.
Talk to them.
But they're not gonna. But the difference between this 5G coronavirus or that 5G caused coronavirus, it's like, I mean, the idea that's somehow in there, it just blows my mind. There's no facts to say that. There's nothing to support that idea.
Implications, ramifications, saturations.
Exactly.
Unnecessary sations. China had 5G mad early. Rolled it out aggressively at the end of 2019.
November 2019, they rolled that out.
This is the danger. See, this is the danger of spreading these conspiracy theories, because these people nonchalantly talk about them and they bring them out just like, I'm begging the question. Well, I'm begging the question that this guy has no idea what he's talking about, and he has never been informed about any of this stuff, and now here he is talking about it and spreading this to so many other people. This has 500,000 views on YouTube.
I'm gonna just let that cook.
You know where it started too, right?
It's rotten.
Where?
Didn't cook.
Wuhan.
You lying.
Nope. That was the.
Yo, but all of this is so says the internet until somebody tell us not. It's always the case, right? It feels like it's always the case. It's always, nah, that'll never happen. That ain't it. Toilet paper's not gonna run out.
Well.
Man, this is just Radio Shock Jock
Now,
at the worst.
speaking of toilet paper, what the hell are y'all doing with the toilet paper?
All right. Okay. God, I'm glad not to listen to that now again. All right. Vaccines. Vaccines are just a way. It just blows my mind that it's somehow a big, huge problem, and that the way that vaccines have become a hot button issue when you know, because a lot of the detractors say that there's basically no science to say that there should be this stuff in it, and that the science behind vaccines is somehow away from us, and that we can't. It's an appeal to authority, and why should I take a vaccine that I haven't been able to study myself and all that kind of stuff? And it's like, you know, science does have a way for you to understand what's in a vaccine. You have to take a class to understand the science behind the vaccine. And guess what? There's a ton of online classes out there. You can get involved with it, and you should get involved. Honestly, if you are actually sitting there doing a bunch of vaccine research and actually reading about vaccines online for a bunch, I really implore you, if you're actually that interested, please go get a degree and actually go do it, because there's a lot of different ways that you could do it. You could contribute in a lot of different ways. You know, please don't be so offhand. If you feel like we could do it a better way, then yeah, we can. And please bring your expertise to us. We could be sequencing the genomes of the viruses that exist in the environment. We could be using molecular biology to clone that. We could be using genetics to compare the genomes of all these different viruses. We could be doing the different virology in order to see, and the evolutionary biology to see how these are going to actually mutate and advance over time. And all of those are ways to get involved. But what I know for a fact is that science isn't obfuscating this stuff. Science isn't keeping it, behind some crazy wall and not sharing with you. Because you know why? Because I hear you. I hear that person out there saying, hey, there's Guillain-Barré syndrome, and it does happen, and don't obfuscate that. And you know what? That really, 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 really small percentage chance that it does happen, you're right. It does happen. But it's nothing compared to the actual chance that you could get, for example, any of these deadly diseases that you could get sick with the flu. You could spread SARS-CoV-2 and potentially kill someone with COVID-19. You know how I know that science hasn't obfuscated this and that it's not hiding it? Because Guillain-Barré syndrome exists. Guillain-Barré syndrome is probably two scientists. Their last names are Guillain and Barré. And they actually, through peer-reviewed studies, they actually did the work, they actually did the studying, they did the research, they put it out there, it was peer-reviewed, and that's how we know that it exists. So don't come saying that science is talking on authority. It's actually wide open. What happens is it's a Dunning-Kruger effect thing where people don't know what they don't know, and that's the problem, is that when you don't know about the mountain in front of you through the fog, you don't know how high that mountain is. You don't know how long people have actually worked on this stuff. You don't know how long people have actually worked to make these vaccines, and could we make them better? Sure, then help make it better. Make and work to make things better and construct a better vaccine than trying to put false information and misinformation out there, and that could actually lead to people getting hurt. So please get vaccinated. Please push back on these people that are so abstinent about vaccines being dangerous, because they are not. And please tell people that once the COVID-19 vaccine comes out, please tell your loved ones to get vaccinated, because it's not going to be the president of the United States that's giving it the green light. It's going to be the scientists that are green lighting it, and that is how we know that it's safe. So, and with that, that is our show. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you. Special thanks to Kristen in the control room. Thank you for Miller for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I will see you back Thursday at 9 p.m. All right. Thank you. Bye.